Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar, DLP, Cloud versus On-Premises. Well, where today we're going to be drilling into how you need to approach data leakage prevention differently when you start moving from some of those traditional premises applications out to the cloud. My name is Rich Campagna. I'm Vice President of Products here at BitGlass, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Salim Hafid, who's our main headline act today. He's a Product Marketing Manager here at BitGlass. Salim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So before we get started, just a couple of quick logistics. First of all, this webinar will be recorded, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy it so much that you're going to want to play it over and over again and share it with all of your friends, so we'll make sure you get a link to that afterwards. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and click the question button and you can fill those in. If we have time at the end, we'll be sure to address a couple of questions. And if we don't have time, we'll make sure to follow up with you, those of you that ask questions afterwards, so don't hesitate to do that. Also, there are a number of amazing attachments you can download by clicking on the attachments button. We'll talk about what some of those are at the end here, but definitely go ahead and take advantage of that, some additional offline material for you to take a look at or watch after the webinar. Also, if you're an ISC Squared member and you're looking for CPE credits, don't worry, we'll take care of all that on the back end as long as you put in your ISC Squared member number when you sign up for the webcast. And then finally, there'll be a number of votes throughout this webinar, and we'd obviously encourage your participation in those votes. Not only do they help us to really tailor this content to exactly what you want to hear, but it's always great to see what your peers are doing as well when we ask some of these questions. And so with that, we're actually going to kick it off with our first vote. We'll put it up here, and this is a question on how you plan to or currently utilize DLP, or data leakage prevention, in your organization. So a number of options here. A, no plans. B, kind of in the investigation mode. C, we're piloting DLP solutions, and this could be any kind of DLP solution, endpoint DLP network, inside of your network for cloud apps. Or D, we're currently using DLP in production environments of some sort. So Salim, as you know from past webinars, I have a horrible track record of guessing these correctly. So I'm not even going to try. It's all on you today. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of folks are probably going to be investigating some third-party solutions, but a lot are probably already using some kind of DLP solution in their existing infrastructure, but maybe not a solution that's tailored to these cloud applications. So, either B or D here would be my guess.
B or D. So you're giving yourself a 50-50 shot by picking two answers. All right. Well, let's stop the votes and let's see what we have. D followed by B. So it looks like you accounted for roughly 90% of our audience here. Excellent work. All right. So you're the official multiple choice guesser on these votes from here on out on the webinars we do together. Okay, so great. So this whole, let's get started with the content here. This whole notion of, moving from premises applications out to the cloud is obviously, I'm sure, something that's big on pretty much everyone's agenda that's dialed into this webinar. But what are some of the things that make something like achieving data leakage prevention as we make that move challenging? So first is kind of the user side of things. A few years back, our employees didn't really have much choice in the whole IT decision-making process. It was, you get what you get and you don't get upset, which is something I say to my small children at home, right? So, it's, you show up on day one of work at a new employer and they give you a managed Windows laptop and a BlackBerry and say, here's the applications you can access. And by the way, if you're off network, you're only going to be able to access those if you connect through a VPN. Now today's users want and really demand and frequently get choice, and whether you give them choice or not, they're going to get it by working around IT if they don't like what IT has provided. But these are some of the kind of the big things. People want to work the way that they choose to work. They don't want to have that dictated to them. So this whole, it used to be managed devices. Now, I want to be able to pick up any device I want, my personal iPhone, my grandma's computer, etc. And I want to be able to do it anywhere, not just from a corporate network, but from Starbucks and etc. Right? And so the move to the cloud becomes more challenging from a security standpoint because of these types of challenges, where in both of these cases, the underlying infrastructure on which the user is accessing potentially very sensitive corporate data is no longer in the control of the IT department. You don't control the Starbucks Wi-Fi network any more than you control the user's BYOD personal device, nor do you control the cloud-based applications for that matter. Yet still, from an IT standpoint, we have some of the same needs around security and control. Right? We need to see who's doing what and hopefully recognize suspicious behaviors. And that may be, sort of at the data level, which is something that data leakage prevention tool can help us get insights into, but it may be just more broadly, suspicious activity. If Salim is right now logged into a couple of, let's say, cloud-based applications from inside of the big glass offices, and then sometime during this webinar, somebody using Salim's credentials logs into another cloud app, maybe into Salesforce from halfway across the world, on a device that we never see Salim logging in from, that's potentially suspicious, especially because I know he's sitting right next to me and he's not in Eastern Europe somewhere. Right? So that's kind of a big thing, and in that case, it doesn't even matter what type of data that person is trying to access. That's still a big concern for us that we want to control. Restricting data on unmanaged devices. A lot of our traditional DLP tools don't have any ability to reach unmanaged devices because they weren't built with BYOD in mind, right? They were built with this whole notion of managed devices and trusted devices, and there'll be a little bit more on that later. Preventing hacked accounts, right? That's kind of a big one when we move out to the cloud. Probably less relevant to this discussion, but certainly near and dear to a lot of your hearts. And the last one is preventing data leakage and controlling access. It doesn't matter what kind of IT infrastructure we put in place. We still need to protect some of that corporate data, whether we have regulatory mandates that are driving us there or otherwise. So let's look at, these needs still exist. There's more and more stuff moving outside of the premise network onto the cloud, which means that we have less and less control over the underlying infrastructure and less ability to put our own security tools in place. I mean, you can't go to Microsoft or to Salesforce or to Box and say, hey, we're going to layer a bunch of firewalls and DLP devices, et cetera, in front of your application for our employee access. It just doesn't work that way. So, but still, we try to do that. I think it's natural for us to want to map some of our existing tools, things that we've already invested in, things that we know well and we know work, to new problems. And that's what a lot of enterprises have been doing, I think, over the last few years, is trying to take some of that existing security infrastructure that we've built up over the last really couple of decades and map it to some of these new problems related to cloud-based applications. And this is a common type of picture, and this is for a lot of organizations, is the first approach that they've taken, where they're going to secure or control the underlying infrastructure. And they're going to do so in a way that pushes a lot of traffic back into, or hopefully all of the traffic back into a corporate environment where things like our premises-based DLP tools can reach and can operate on that traffic. And what does this entail? Really, it entails ensuring that any device that's accessing corporate applications, even cloud-based applications, is going to be VPN'd back into corporate. It's fully managed by the organization. And those are the primary tools we can use as assurances to ensure that any traffic and, of course, any sensitive corporate data that we're going to be accessing is going through some of these premises-based security systems, including a data leakage prevention engine. Same goes for some of our branch offices as an example, right? We're going to map everything back into corporate so we can continue to lock things down. But then, there are a number of challenges here. One, you see that little device in gray at the bottom of the slide coming in from Starbucks, right? You have this, what we call the BYOD blind spot that a lot of traditional security tools run into where, if let's say it's Box as the back-end cloud-based application, that user wants to access that application directly, they can. That's an unmanaged device on an unmanaged network. There's not really anything that you can do about that. That user is going to get access to that application. Maybe they're going to install the Box Sync app, and they're going to sync a whole bunch of corporate data down to that device. And so that's a big challenge that a picture like this doesn't solve. Not to mention the fact that this is just less and less of a reality for a lot of organizations. It's complex to deploy. Nobody wants to have VPN or MDM clients on their devices because they slow things down, they drain battery life, et cetera. Right? So this is I think a logical first take for a lot of organizations to try to solve some of these challenges, but it doesn't fit for a lot of reasons, and so people want to move in another direction. And so these are some of the, if we drill down into that picture just specifically into data leakage or data loss prevention, a couple of big challenges that surface specific to that type of service when we move out to the cloud. First, as I kind of referred to already, it's limited just to managed devices and applications. So we have that BYOD blind spot from the prior slide. That's a huge blind spot, right? That's part of the advantage of the public cloud is that these applications are readily available and accessible by anyone. But the big downside of it is that same thing. Anybody on any device can log into one of these apps and access our data as long as they have the right credentials. And so that's a big challenge. Second big thing is sort of architectural in terms of the way that a lot of these DLP solutions have been built. They were built and architected for a scenario where we're trying to protect data from leaving the organization. And the primary avenue for that data leaving the organization was, just outbound, let's say towards the internet or maybe from within a managed device, download to a USB drive, etc. And the assumption there was that a lot of these devices are trusted, meaning that users should be able to access anything they want to, and only if they try to take it outside of the corporate network or off one of those managed devices do we want to implement DLP policies, which means that chances are your DLP tools that you have in place now aren't going to sit in the path of, let's say, active sync traffic when a user is downloading corporate mail to a personal mobile device. But they may be able to have the ability to protect data and restrict data going outbound in the send direction. So they're not built in sort of a bidirectional fashion that's necessary for reducing risk in today's typical IT environment. Content analysis, they typically use things like keyword matches, regular expressions, etc. I don't think as we get into the cloud piece here, that isn't changing too much. I think that for a lot of organizations with the move to the cloud, they want a familiar set of policy and a familiar way of writing policy. Out-of-band access. This is a big new thing. Very few premises applications that I'm aware of that are pretty much built specifically to enable sharing of data and for content outside of the organization. There's a lot of internal sharing tools, especially related to files. But today's big cloud apps, it's just a simple matter of hitting a button, and very quickly and easily you're leaking a whole bunch of very sensitive content outside of the organization. And what makes that difficult for a DLP solution is these DLP solutions have no idea that's going on. There's no user on any device that's actually downloading this data. It's going directly out the back end of a cloud-based application and completely bypassing any of our existing security controls. So that's a big one in and of itself. And for a lot of the customers that we deal with, the 1-2 punch of DLP challenges when they move to the cloud are a lot of what I've talked to about already. Unmanaged device access and external file sharing. And just some others as well. The ability to decrypt traffic coming to and from public cloud applications. That's something that even if some of your solutions can do that, they'll typically do so at very low performance. And of course, the additional WAN latency of pushing traffic from a cloud-based application into corporate for inspection and then back out to the public internet causes additional performance concerns. So we have a set of sort of architectural limitations as well as performance concerns, which kind of map up to traditional DLP just isn't going to cut it as we make this move. So Salim, before I pass it over to you to kind of wow us with how we're going to solve these big challenges, let's fire up the second vote question here. Second and final vote question I should ask. So you're 1 for 1 so far, Salim.
All right.
Let's get this one going. All right. Which of the following DLP capabilities is most critical to your needs? The ability to scan files at download. B, the ability to track data after it's been downloaded or has left the organization. C, the ability to limit things like external file sharing. Or D, the ability to limit access from unmanaged devices. And let's take this question in sort of a cloud context, because there may be other challenges inside of the network. But when you move to the cloud, these are kind of the big ones that we hear from enterprises on a very ongoing and regular basis. So, Salim, what's your thought?
Well, I think a lot of these things go hand in hand, right? A lot of organizations need to be able to limit file sharing, limit access from unmanaged devices. And the way they can limit access to those most sensitive files is, to scan those files, right? So I think the ability to limit file sharing and access, C and D are probably going to be the go-to answers for a lot of people.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Okay, C and D. Once again, if I was a bookie, I wouldn't allow you to pick two teams in a sporting event, but I'm not, so I'll give you two choices.
All right.
All right, let's see what we got. C and D again.
All right.
Did you email these folks beforehand and set this up? Okay. I mean, limiting access from unmanaged devices and external file sharing. That's pretty consistent with what we've seen, with other audiences out there. So they must be. In fact, we recently did a survey on this where we asked, I think, a couple of hundred CIOs, and those are the top two things that popped to the top of the list. So big concerns when we move to the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are we going to solve them?
All right. Well, let's dive right in here to sort of the CASB data leakage prevention capabilities that really enable you to secure data in your public cloud application, whatever it may be. So, as we've said before, support for BYOD is absolutely critical. The ability to access data for your employees is becoming increasingly prevalent, right? They want to be able to access from their mobile device at a Starbucks or what have you. They want to be able to access that data from anywhere. And you as an organization probably want to enable that functionality, right? You want them to be able to work from wherever they want to work. It's just a reality of the world we live in today. But as we said before, right, a big concern is that access from unmanaged devices, right? You don't want them to have access to all the data unsecured. We want to impose some limitations on that. So what a CASB enables you to do is ensure that you can distinguish between managed and unmanaged devices and apply sort of contextual DLP, right? Understanding the type of device, the context, where they're accessing the data from, what location, the role of the employee in the organization, that sort of thing, and to apply policies based on those criteria is more valuable than just having this blanket policy, and especially when it comes to securing that access on unmanaged devices on an unsecured network. A CASB also enables you to do this bidirectional scanning with contextual access control, right? So this is important in that you want to, just as in a traditional on-premise application, you want to be able to scan all those files and understand what you have on the network, understand what data is being stored in your application, and which of that data is the most sensitive, right? What do you want to limit access to? And so, through content analysis and policy matching, we're able to identify those files that are the most sensitive and use some of those same, matching for keywords, those regular expressions, those advanced combinations, like keywords in combination with some of those patterns. These are all rules that exist in traditional on-premise applications that also function in a similar manner in cloud applications and have the same sort of application when it comes to cloud DLP, right? You want to be able to, redact social security numbers or credit card numbers that you have in a given file. So there's also the need to control external sharing and API-based access to data, right? So as we said before, in these applications like, say, in Google Drive, you have a share button in the top right corner of every file that you're accessing, right? So as an employee, it becomes incredibly easy to share those files, and IT needs some ability to limit that sharing. And so by having these policies in place that ensure that you're limiting access only where it's appropriate, right, to the most sensitive files on the device, to the employees that you want to have access to that data, and on the devices where you want them to be able to access that data, that becomes absolutely critical, right? You don't want to have this blanket policy where you have everyone accessing all the data, but at the same time you don't want to limit access to everything. So by having those patterns in place, these granular policies, if you will, you're able to better control who has access to what data and provide people with access on unmanaged devices without exposing yourself to a lot of risk. There's also the fact that a global cloud-scale distributed infrastructure minimizes impact, right? There's the fact that a cloud access security broker like Bitglass runs on AWS and is a scalable solution and works everywhere across all devices is incredibly valuable to organizations that really need that kind of scalable solution, and that perhaps you have a global workforce and they're accessing data from different locations, right? You want to ensure that they have a good experience, and so that's important there. So a cloud access security broker, cloud DLP, right, enables that contextual DLP, right? This is absolutely critical to be able to distinguish between different device types, between different locations of a given user, between whether someone is on the corporate network or off the corporate network. One great thing about the cloud DLP solutions relative to traditional DLP is you can use any device, right? So instead of just having a managed device as on the network, as was often the case before, that ability to provide access on any device and still be able to secure that data on an unmanaged device is incredibly valuable to organizations. And then there's the real-time proxy accelerated API scans, right? So a lot of the time these DLP policies are applied at send time, not download time, and there's the need for a combination of the two, right? So when a user downloads the file, to ensure that that file, when it's uploaded, is scanned and that doesn't have any sensitive content, so that when the employee downloads that file, the appropriate policies are applied to that file, and that's also critical. And then there's the need to modify permissions, right? So sharing, as we mentioned, is a big concern when it comes to these cloud applications. So the ability to say, okay, we don't want this file being shared because it has some sensitive data in it. The ability to watermark, apply DRM, redact data, encrypt data. All of this is critical functionality in that when you watermark a file, you're able to track it wherever it goes, and that's valuable, especially in an organization where perhaps you want to know how your data is being shared. DRM is great in that you can apply limits on not only who can access that data, requiring some form of authentication, but also time limits on that. So say you only want someone to have access to a file for a certain time period, and so you're able to apply that policy, apply DRM to a particular file, and alter based on your needs that DRM applied to that file. Redacting data is, of course, valuable for an organization that has sort of particular keywords that you don't want being shared outside the organization, right? So say in an HR department in an organization, you probably have a lot of employee social security numbers, that sort of thing. So the ability to ensure that employees who want to access that data off the network, let's say, that you're able to redact that extremely sensitive information. And then there's encryption, of course, always valuable for organizations that want to, add an extra layer of security to files within their cloud apps. So the comprehensive CASB architecture, we at Bitglass use a hybrid proxy architecture. The reverse proxy and active sync proxy to enable secure BYOD without agents. And this agentless solution is sort of unique in that you don't need to install any profiles or certificates on an end user's mobile device. It's incredibly easy to deploy. Users on unmanaged devices don't want to have this invasive, things like NVM and MAN. They don't want to install these profiles or certificates on their devices. They don't want the organization to have complete control and visibility over their personal data, but oftentimes they're fine with having that control over corporate data, right? And so what we enable with the reverse proxy and active sync proxy is not only native contact calendar email on a user's mobile device, but also the ability to access things like Google Apps or Office 365 on an unmanaged mobile device and still secure the data on that device, right? And applying DLP when data is downloaded from those cloud applications through the proxy. There's also the forward proxy piece, and that's, of course, for organizations that want managed devices, and you can, of course, enforce policies that ensure that only specific files are accessible from unmanaged devices and that others are accessible only from unmanaged devices. So you can say, for example, that you don't want a file with sensitive employee information to be accessed from an unmanaged device, and that's fine. And what a forward proxy enables is that sort of more a higher level of control over the end user's device. Then you have the API piece, and here is where you can do things like scan the documents in your cloud app, be it Google Apps, Office 365, Box, what have you, and as it comes down to the end user's mobile device, apply these DLP policies to those documents, right? So things, as we mentioned before, like watermarking, DRM, redaction, and encryption of these files. So this is just an example of a typical policy that we often see. And as you can see, there's on a managed device, you use things like the forward proxy and the active sync proxy to control access to files, right? Control access to the data that you store in your public cloud application. So on a managed device, you probably want to allow more access because a managed device you, of course, have more control over. So you can allow things like thick clients, email, access to, of course, documents within the browser, that sort of thing. And here you're generally allowing full access to these files on your cloud application, right? This is sort of the traditional. You have complete control over the device, and so you enable access to the application and the files within the application, right? So that's sort of the traditional sort of broad access, and you can, of course, apply DLP to those files as well. As for BYOD, we use things like reverse proxy and the active sync proxy, which I mentioned previously. Perhaps more limited access on these devices, right? These are the devices that you have less control over, but you still can do things like selective wipe with the Big Glass solution, that sort of thing, and apply DLP, DRM to different files that are downloaded by these unmanaged devices. So perhaps you want to have more limited access on an unmanaged device, right? Maybe allow downloads of files, but apply DRM to most of those files, the most sensitive files, right? And then you have that API piece, right? And you can do things like block external sharing, limit external sharing with certain parties, that sort of thing. And you can, of course, have alerts, and this is a critical piece, understanding not only how files are being shared, but with whom they're being shared, and when they're sensitive, being able to act on that information and limit that sharing. So this is just a screenshot here of the Big Glass dashboard, and it's not very clear, but these different cloud applications that you may have in an organization, and of course our solution works with all cloud applications. You can have different policies applied to different file types within each of these cloud applications, right? So you have this full breadth of control over all these cloud applications and data access from any cloud application. So that comprehensive data security and these policies that you can use across all applications is a valuable tool for IT administrators to have. So a couple use cases here before we wrap up. Cove Human Services is an organization that uses Google Apps within their organization. And of course, as with many healthcare organizations, there's the HIPAA compliance is a factor here, right? So HIPAA compliance with Google Apps in an organization where BYOD is sort of a critical component is a very interesting use case for not just for the Big Lab solution, but for Cloud DLP in general. So here their goal is obviously to secure protected health information, or PHI. And they, of course, want to remain compliant, and they're leveraging things like DLP and identity management and this mobile data protection to ensure that they do remain compliant and that all the data within their organization stays secure. So the ability to protect mobile data, right? That's a critical piece here, where you have a lot of their employees walking around with mobile devices, right? They are mobile at the end of the day, unlike some organizations where it's maybe okay to just have a managed Windows laptop. This is sort of a mobile-first organization. When you think of mobile-first data protection, the needs here are being able to enable BYOD, right? Secure BYOD. An agentless solution here is incredibly valuable, right? And BYOD is, as we often say, it's an adoption, not rollout, right? So getting employees to actually take up BYOD and access the corporate data from their personal mobile device is incredibly valuable, especially to an organization where being able to access that data from a mobile device is essential. And of course, things like identity management, right? Integrated identity management, and being able to, with just one solution, have secure means of authentication is important in an organization that wants to remain HIPAA compliant. Right? Things like multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, single-use passwords. These are all means by which you can have a more secure means of authentication, right? And that's important for these healthcare organizations where authentication is a piece of HIPAA compliance, right? And of course, DLP to protect the files themselves and the data within those files, the ability to apply DLP, contextual DLP, and understand, okay, this user is accessing data from a mobile device, and maybe we don't allow sharing from that device, or we limit sharing in some way. And you can, of course, as we've said before, identify those files through our API scanning engine. Identify the files to which you want to apply the DLP and understand how granular you want those policies to be on those files. So here's another case, an ad agency that wanted to secure Office 365, and here the organization's need is primarily to limit sharing, right? So you want to protect a lot of the clients of this ad agency have, as you can imagine, sensitive work product in this organization's cloud application, right? Perhaps unreleased upcoming products. And so as an organization, they wanted to have complete visibility and control over the data within their cloud application. They wanted to be able to limit access from unmanaged devices to just the project team members, right? You don't want to have everyone within perhaps you don't want everyone within the organization to have access to a particular file, or you don't want anyone outside the organization to have access to a particular file, or you want them to only be able to share with their clients. So all of these are different needs that not only this ad agency has, but that a lot of the clients sort of imposed on this ad agency, right? They want their files to be secure, and so the ad agency has to act in order to ensure that those files do remain secure. So the goal here was really to prevent data leakage. And by using Cloud DLP and contextual access control, understanding not only how is the file being shared, but also is the user trying to access that data from a managed or an unmanaged device, and understanding the context in which a user is trying to access or share a file is important to understanding whether that user should be able to do that. So for this ad agency, that was something that was very important to them, very important to their clients, and that we were able to enable that and limit access from unmanaged devices is very valuable to an organization like this. And traditional DLP in this case doesn't solve the problem of DLP at download time, but with a solution like Big Labs, you can have that contextual DLP and a combination of that traditional DLP and contextual DLP at download time. And so from here, I'll hand it back to Rich to wrap things up.
Thanks, Lane. Just remember, if you have any last questions, feel free to submit them into the online tool here. I don't see any right now that we can address, so we'll continue on. But these are you see the resources here on the screen. This is a couple of the key resources that you can get by clicking on that attachment button and download them directly. And as well, please don't forget to rate today's webinar. That's very helpful for us in terms of improving our content, especially if you leave some comments in there that are actionable for us to make sure that we have a really solid set of content to provide to you moving forward. So with that, today we covered, I think, a fantastic amount of ground. We talked about the move from premises applications out to the cloud and the challenges that presents to the typical organization that is using tools like data leakage prevention. We also talked about some of the challenges you may run into if you use sort of the traditional tools that you've already invested in. But the fact is that what most organizations are doing, and Salim just went through a couple of key case studies, is that they're using a new set of tools, what Gartner calls cloud access security brokers, to ensure that they make that transition smoothly and that they're not giving up security of their corporate data with the move to the cloud. So with that, Salim, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great day.